The title of Duke of Rothesay and the other Scottish titles which I've had the honour to carry for so long, I now pass to Catherine.
Imagine a world of giant stone castles, golden crowns, and secrets hidden behind heavy wooden doors. Usually when a king speaks, everyone knows what he is going to say. He talks about history or he waves to a crowd. But one day, King Charles did something that no one expected. He stood in a room filled with important people and said a name. That name changed the future of the royal family forever. He didn't just give a speech. He didn't just say goodbye. He handed over the heart of the family to one woman. This wasn't just a simple gift. It was like a giant weight being placed on someone's shoulders. It was a choice that made some people happy, some people proud, and some people very, very sad. Today we are going to talk about that big moment. We are going to look at the secret meetings, the quiet dinners, and the look on everyone's faces when the king decided who he trusted most. This is the story of how Catherine became the most important woman in the palace and what that means for the future of the crown. Make sure to stay tuned because this story is about more than just titles. It is about love, hurt, and a family trying to stay together when things get hard. The titles of Duke of Rothesay and the other special Scottish names have belonged to King Charles for a very long time. These are names that carry a lot of history and honor. Now the king has decided to give those names to Catherine. When he said this, the room did not get loud with clapping. Instead, it got very, very quiet. It was the kind of quiet where you can hear a pin drop on the floor. King Charles's last big job was not a normal speech. He didn't just wave his hand or say he was tired. Instead, he made a big announcement that felt like a sharp blade cutting through the air of the palace. He said that Catherine would now be the new sole matriarch of the crown. That is a very big word, but it basically means she is the one woman everyone trusts to lead the family. She is the one who has to keep the monarchy steady and strong when everyone else is having a hard time holding it together. Before we talk more about what this means for the royal family, please hit the subscribe button. You don't want to miss any of our updates about what is happening in the palace. Charles stood in front of the group of people. He looked very calm, like a man who knew exactly what he was doing. He had already thought about how his words would make people feel. He knew that naming Catherine as the sole matriarch was a huge deal. This role means she is the person who guides the family's good image. She is the one who keeps them united in private. She is also the one who shows the way for all the big ceremonies in the future. This was not just a fancy new name, it was a judgment. It was the king saying who he thought was doing the best job. Catherine did not look like she had won a game when her name was spoken. She didn't smile or cheer, she just stood very still. She was very disciplined. Even though it was a great honor, it felt like a very heavy backpack was being put on her. She knew that this title made her more important than the rest of the family, but it also made her feel a little bit alone. Charles put his hand on the wooden stand in front of him. He waited for a long time before he spoke again. That long pause made everyone feel a little bit scared. It was more frightening than any words he could have said. Then he said Catherine's name again. He said it in a way that meant the decision was final. It wasn't a nice compliment or a small gift. It was the way the king told the world that he was passing the family's trust from his generation to the next one. William, her husband, heard the weight in the words before anyone else did. William's face changed. He realized this wasn't just the king being nice to his wife. It was the king saying that the whole family would now rely on Catherine's strength. He was saying that the family needs her to be calm and to keep their private pain from becoming a big show for everyone to watch. Camilla felt the meaning of the words right away. She is the queen consort and she was watching from the side of the room. She felt hurt not just because of what the king said, but because of what the words really meant underneath. It felt like the king didn't trust her as much anymore. It felt like the deepest trust of the crown had moved away from her and had landed on Catherine instead. Charles did not look back at Camilla quickly. He probably couldn't. The king knew that people would remember this moment as him doing his duty. But inside the family, it would be remembered as a moment that caused a lot of hurt feelings. Catherine accepted the silence of the room. She didn't have any other choice. William stood next to her. He realized that their future had just become much heavier than they ever thought it would be. Before Catherine could even think about the big job she now had, the palace began to look at the people around her. Some people would want to protect her and help her do a good job. Other people might feel jealous or upset about it. Every big royal decision has official papers, fancy seals, and perfect words. But this decision was really about faces. It was about Catherine's shock, which she tried to hide. It was about William's pride, which he tried to guard. It was about Camilla's sadness, which she tried to control. And it was about Charles's certainty, even though he looked very tired. Behind this big announcement were years of hurt feelings, people being loyal and people being disappointed. The crown didn't just pick a person to look pretty on a stamp. It picked the person they trusted to hold the family's heart. This was very important because trust had become very hard to find. Catherine stayed very still even after the words were finished, but everyone who was standing close to her could feel the pressure. The crown means the royal family and the whole organization they run. Now the emotional future of that whole organization was in Catherine's hands. This matters a lot because people's trust in the royals is hard to keep. Catherine had spent many years being the calm person standing next to William. But this moment pushed her out of the background. She wasn't just helping anymore, she was leading. William understood that right away. He knew that Catherine being the leader would make their home stronger. But he also knew it would make people feel quiet anger toward her. People in palaces are very polite, but sometimes they hide their real feelings behind those good manners. Camilla did not get angry at first. Instead, she tried to stay in control. She sat very straight and held her hands together very tightly. It looked like she was trying to hold back all the things she wanted to say but couldn't. Being married to Charles gave her a high rank, but that rank did not stop her from being skipped over in this big decision. The king felt that hurt too. He didn't look into her eyes for a long time. It wasn't because he was mean, but because he knew the choice he made hurt her very deeply. An important worker at the palace closed a folder that was meant for the family to look at in private. That little move said a lot. It showed that Catherine's new job had been talked about for a long time before the announcement. They had thought about it and planned it long before the rest of the family heard it. William leaned in close to Catherine. He asked her if she was ready for this. She answered very softly and said, "I have to be." Her voice did not shake, but you could see the fear in her eyes even though she was trying to be brave. Charles heard her answer and looked down at the floor. He had picked Catherine because the royal family needed someone who could feel pain without starting a fight. But the family knew this choice didn't just happen out of nowhere. Something had happened that made the king feel like he had to act. It was something private and sharp that he couldn't ignore anymore. To understand why Charles picked Catherine in such a public way, we have to look back at a hidden moment. Long before the king spoke Catherine's name, there was one night the palace never forgot. It wasn't a big party or a show on TV. It was just a quiet dinner at Windsor Castle. But at that dinner, something happened that changed how the family felt forever. Charles left the room that night knowing that the royal family could not just stay silent anymore. He had gone to that dinner hoping for a nice, calm meal, but instead he found everyone feeling very tense. This dinner is now called the Windsor Supper Incident. It was a private meal that was later written down in a secret report. It became the point where everything changed. It showed who thought Catherine should lead the family's image and who was still trying to stop her. The family had gathered to show they were united, but that unity broke apart the moment someone questioned what Catherine's job should be. This was a big deal because the royals were already trying hard to look like they were doing okay. One big public fight could ruin all the work they had done to fix their image. Catherine did not say anything fast when she was challenged at the dinner. She stayed calm and didn't act like she was bothered, but William noticed that her fingers were gripping her glass very tightly before she put it down. He knew that his wife wasn't scared of doing her job. She was just scared of being in the middle of a fight she didn't want to start. Charles watched her and felt very sad inside. He had hoped the old family arguments would stay hidden for at least one night. But instead, those arguments were right there at the table, even though everyone was being polite. Camilla said something that felt very sharp, even though she said it softly. She talked about how people should earn their authority. Everyone knew what she meant. She didn't have to say Catherine's name twice for people to know she was talking about her. Those words were put into a report for the king after the dinner. That report made the moment feel very serious. Catherine stayed polite, but her silence felt louder than if she had started yelling. William looked at Charles, waiting to see if his father would do something. Charles didn't get mad or start shouting. Instead, he just got very cold and quiet. After the dinner was over, he asked for a secret plan about the family's future. He wanted to know the order of who would do what jobs and who would show up at public events. That was the start of Catherine's path to her new big role. Camilla had only said one sentence, but the king heard it as a warning. That dinner didn't end the problems, it just made them move toward a big confrontation that everyone was trying to avoid. When the old hurt feelings finally came out again, it wasn't at a big parade. It was in a private room where being polite couldn't protect anyone anymore. The fight started off quietly, but it didn't stay that way. Charles wanted everything to be in order. Camilla wanted someone to explain why things were changing. William wanted to protect his wife, and Catherine just wanted the fighting to end without anyone being mean. They were in a room with no cameras and no audience. The family finally had to ask the question that had been bothering them. Why was Catherine the one who was chosen? What did this choice mean for everyone else who didn't get picked? Charles called this meeting because the public announcement hadn't made the family feel better. It had only shown where the cracks were. The crown could not afford to have the family fighting when Catherine was being put in the center of everything. He wanted everyone to be calm. He wanted them to understand his choice. But the king knew that understanding something doesn't mean you like it. Camilla's silence told him that she was very hurt. She looked at him and asked the question that no one else was brave enough to ask. She asked if this meant he didn't trust her to be the emotional heart of the monarchy anymore. She didn't yell, but the hurt in her voice made the room feel very tight. Charles put his pen down slowly. He finally looked at her and said that the crown needed someone who wasn't part of the old wars. That was a very hard thing to hear. He didn't say she did anything wrong, but he was pointing at all the old fights from the past. Catherine spoke up before anyone could get really angry. She told Camilla that she never asked to take anyone's place. She was very careful with her words, but William could tell she was under a lot of stress. He watched his wife try her best not to look like she was winning or like she was being defensive. Catherine had been given a great honor, but that honor felt like a sword being pointed at her from both sides. She could do her duty, but she couldn't make everyone else happy about what the king had done. William finally spoke up too. He said that Catherine had dealt with a lot of hard things that other people only talked about. When he said that, the room felt even colder. William didn't shout, but his words showed how much he had been holding back for years. Charles knew then that things had truly changed. Camilla heard it too. She looked away. She wasn't defeated, but she had to realize that this wasn't just a small disappointment. It was a change in who the king trusted the most. The meeting didn't fix everything, but it showed where the real power was now. It showed who was ready to use that power. Once the words were out in the open, the palace couldn't pretend this was just about feelings. It was now a question of who was in control. In the royal family, power doesn't usually come with a loud bang. It moves through letters, schedules, and where people sit at a table. It's about who is invited into a room first. Catherine's new job didn't happen just because the king likes her. Behind the scenes, there were many advisors and family plans, but at the center of it was one tired king making a very personal choice. Charles read a final note by himself, and the quiet room felt very heavy. The note explained how Catherine's role would change how the family leads and how they talk to the public. This was important because the family was fighting for more than just old traditions. They were fighting for people to trust them. If the public stopped believing the family was strong, then the crowns and the big parades wouldn't matter at all. Catherine felt like she was being protected and trapped at the same time. She knew the king's decision helped her and William, but it also made her responsible for fixing problems she didn't even start. William saw the danger. He saw how the palace would say good things about her while also expecting her to deal with everyone's bad moods. Catherine could be the person who holds the family together, but being that person is very hard. It means you have to carry the weight that nobody else wants. Charles took off his glasses and rubbed his eyes. He had signed many important papers, but this one made him feel a special kind of sad because it turned deep feelings into a formal rule. The important people at the palace started changing the rules for how things would work. Catherine would now be the most important person at Family of. A new schedule showed her in the middle of all the big things coming up. She wasn't just standing next to the future, she was part of it. Camilla's name was still on the list for public jobs, but one palace worker noticed that her role was now just for show. Catherine's role was the one that held the family's real future. That was a very tough thing for Camilla. She was still visible to the public, but she wasn't the one people trusted most behind the scenes. Charles knew it, Catherine knew it, and William knew it best of all. The royal machine was moving, and it doesn't stop just because someone's feelings are hurt. As the schedules changed and the doors opened differently, the people who thought they were safe began to feel the changes. The announcement sounded fancy, but by the next morning it was causing big changes behind the scenes. The palace felt different. Nothing had fallen apart, but everything had shifted. Doors were opened for Catherine with a new kind of hurry. People stopped talking when William walked into a room. Camilla's team got new instructions that were hard to explain, and Charles had to watch as his big decision made his own family feel the cost. Catherine's office got the first changes. She had new jobs to do that involved leading the family and planning how they would look to the public. A ceremonial responsibility sounds like a boring thing, but it's actually a big deal. It means you are the face of the monarchy during important times. Catherine was no longer just a helper. She was the person everyone had to go through to get the family's message out. William knew this was dangerous. He knew that every new job made Catherine stronger, but it also made her the target for all the family's problems. Camilla got her own new notes that morning. She read them over and over. Many of the jobs she used to do were now being given to Catherine's team. This wasn't just a change in the calendar. It was the king saying he didn't trust her household as much as he used to. She didn't scream or make a scene. She just sat there with the paper, trying to hide the words that hurt her. Catherine told William what she was most afraid of. She was scared that the world would think she was trying to be mean to Camilla. She didn't want people to think she was taking things away on purpose. She wanted people to know she was just doing what the king. William told her that the decision was the king's choice, and the king was the one who had to deal with the consequences. Catherine listened, but she still felt worried. She knew that even when people honor you, it can still feel like you are being punished in private. Charles felt that too. A palace worker said that a private photo was taken off the king's desk that morning. The empty spot where the photo used to be showed that there was a lot of sadness that no one was talking about. Then came the change in where people would sit. At a big church service, Catherine was told to sit closer to Charles than Camilla would. That was a very small change, but it meant a lot. The rules of where people sit are very strict in the royal family. Now those rules were showing everyone how the king really felt. But the biggest moment wasn't about where people sat. It was about a private talk between Charles and Catherine. When all the noise of the palace went away, Charles finally asked Catherine to talk to him. There were no helpers or advisors in the room. It was just the king and the princess. For the first time, Charles didn't talk like a boss. He talked like a man who knew his choice had changed everything. Charles asked Catherine to sit down. The name sole matriarch was like a third person in the room with them. The king wanted her to know why he picked her. He said the family needed more than just people with fancy titles. They needed someone the people could believe in. He liked that she had been through hard times but didn't become a mean person because of it. Catherine listened carefully, but she was still scared. She was ready to do her job, but she didn't want to be the reason the family was split apart. Charles told her that he had watched her stay calm when things were difficult. He said that was a very rare thing in their family, and he needed to protect it. Catherine looked down because the nice things he said didn't make the job feel any lighter. She told him she was worried the new title would make her look cold or like she was trying too hard to be the boss. The king didn't stop her from talking. He knew she was right about the danger. Catherine asked if he really trusted her or if he was just trying to fix things because it was too late to do anything else. Charles opened a drawer and pulled out a note he had written himself. He had written the words "Sole Matriarch" days before he told anyone else. He showed it to her to be honest. He was a tired man who had made a choice and couldn't go back. Catherine read the note and realized this wasn't a prize for being good. It was a promise she had to keep. She promised she wouldn't use her power to hurt Camilla, and she wouldn't let William do everything alone. She would do the job to stop the family from making the same mistakes they made in the past. Charles looked at her, and in that moment he didn't look like a powerful king. He looked like a father asking for forgiveness without using the actual word. By the time the rest of the world figured out what Charles had done, the palace had already moved on. Outside the palace, the news was a huge deal. People saw Catherine as someone who was stepping up during a hard time. While Charles was moving back from being the leader, the public felt the change. Something old was finishing and something new was starting. William watched the news in private. He was proud of his wife, but he was also worried. He knew that when people become symbols, they can get trapped by what people expect of them. TV news said that Charles's decision was a sign that the future of the royals was now all about William and Catherine. This was important because the family was trying to show they knew who should be in charge. Catherine saw herself on TV and turned the sound off. The crown had put her right in the middle of everyone's feelings. The weight of all those people watching her felt heavier than any praise. She had accepted the job quietly, but now millions of people were watching and wondering if she could fix what was broken. The next morning, a big newspaper had a picture of Catherine standing next to Charles. The headline called her the new matriarch. That picture told the whole country that the king had passed the trust to her. On morning shows, people said this was about trust, not just duty. They said it so much that even the people working at the palace started saying it too. A crowd of people gathered outside Buckingham Palace. They weren't cheering loudly, they were just watching. They were curious about history happening right in front of them. Catherine's new role made the public feel like things would be okay. But William knew that being calm on the outside doesn't mean you are calm on the inside. He saw how the country liked her, but he also knew how much it cost her to stay so quiet and disciplined. Charles heard what the people were saying, but he didn't celebrate. He knew that people being happy didn't fix the pain inside his family. Camilla was still part of the story, even if the cameras weren't focused on her as much. Her silence was something people noticed too. Public support gave Catherine strength, but the final word on whether this worked had to come from the family itself. In the end, Charles's last big job wasn't about getting rid of one person or making another person a winner. It was about admitting what the family needed to do to survive. Catherine didn't grab the power for herself. She was given a heavy job to keep things steady. Camilla hadn't gone away, but she had to see that her influence had a limit. William didn't just get help, he saw his wife become the answer to the family's problems. Catherine stood next to William after a private family church service. She wasn't shocked anymore, but she was different. The service was a private time for the family to think and be together. It was their last chance to accept what the world already knew. The crown had found a new heart. Old fights couldn't lead the way anymore. William stayed close to Catherine. He wasn't just protecting her, he was showing her she wasn't alone. Charles watched them from across the room. He knew he had made the right choice. Naming Catherine the sole matriarch was his way of fixing things. He chose stability and trust over staying angry about the past. He didn't erase what happened before, but he wouldn't let it ruin the future for the next generation. When the king gave Catherine a small nod, everyone who saw it knew what it meant. The change was complete. Camilla accepted it without saying a word. She was still hurt, but she knew the family had picked a future that was bigger than her own feelings. Her influence wasn't gone, but everyone could see where it ended. Catherine didn't look like someone who had won a fight. She just looked steady and strong. That was what Charles had seen in her all along. William took Catherine's hand after the service and she let him hold it. That small move showed that her job would be hard, but she wouldn't have to do it by herself. Catherine had become the moral leader of the family. She wasn't a conqueror or a rival. She was the woman everyone trusted to hold the monarchy together when things were falling apart. The future wasn't going to be led by the loudest person. It was going to be led by the person strong enough to be quiet and graceful. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you next.